Currently, that freezing rain sleet potential by midnight, teens in the 20s in the overnight hours. But we are expecting to see those conditions mostly just remain below freezing. Right now, a balmy 28 degrees. When you factor in those winds, it feels like 19 with winds out of the north at 16 to 20 miles an hour. So as we look at the current radar right now, you're able to see where most of this precipitation is falling. We're seeing those temps below freezing up to 29 degrees, 30 degrees out at Alvin. It is sticking right now along the coastal areas from Brazoria to Galveston, even League City, getting some of the heavier precipitation with some sleet in some locations. So definitely take all those wet spots that you see on those roadways as ice. And we're definitely dealing with that freezing drizzle. We have different types of precipitation that is falling here across southeast Texas. And just keep in mind that rain, when that rain falls, it's when the entire column of air is above 32 degrees. But one of the most hazardous types of precipitation is that freezing rain, is when it falls as snow in the upper levels of the atmosphere, it melts in a warmer middle layer of the atmosphere, and once it makes contact with a surface, that usually forms as ice. And that's what we've seen here across the Houston area as within the past 5 to 12 hours or so. So we're not dealing with really any snow. We're definitely dealing with a warmer layer somewhere in there with a higher warmer layer of the atmosphere. But those temperatures, of course, very cold across the area. Right now, 28 at Rice Military, even East End at 25 degrees. We have spent several hours below freezing. It is very well likely that we are not going to see above freezing temperatures at least until Wednesday afternoon. That's a very long time of very cold temps. And of course, off to the north of us, Huntsville at 21, 22 in College Station, Brenham at 24, with Liberty at 27 degrees. Current wind speeds right now, we're seeing those northerly winds between 12 and 15 miles an hour, and ultimately those winds are really is what's causing a fairly dangerous feels like temp or wind chill. It's feeling as cold as 16 out at Bush Airport, 16 out at Sugarland, 15 degrees in Tomball. So very cold conditions, and if you are not in multiple layers, if you're spending prolonged time outdoors, you might want to layer up. There is a lot of winter weather alerts that are currently in place across southeast Texas. We have that winter weather advisory that now includes the entire portion of our viewing area. That is when we can see that light freezing rain and drizzle with that ice accumulation up to 1/10 of an inch. Ultimately, we are expecting some traces of precipitation to continue falling in the overnight hours. But today is that precipitation threat, freezing precipitation threat, but tomorrow is when we are expecting a dangerous wind chill. There's a wind chill warning, or actually a wind chill advisory that will be in effect, where it feels like temps are going to range between 5 and 10 degrees. And that is because winds are expected to increase as we head into the overnight hours. Also, that harsh freeze warning will be in effect until 9 a.m. Wednesday, as we are expecting over at least 24 hours of below freezing temperatures. It's important to know the difference between a regular freeze and a hard freeze. And of course, that hard freeze is when temperatures drop below 24 degrees for 2 or more hours. That could cause heavy freeze damage to plants, as well as light freeze damage to plants when it comes to a regular freeze, as temperatures will drop below 32 degrees. Going into looking at that future track, we are expecting that winter weather to still remain in the picture for much of the evening, mainly sticking along the coast. So small traces of precipitation expected to remain from Angleton, Bolivar Peninsula, Galveston, ending for the most part for our north and western areas, which is the area that we've seen most of that precipitation. And then a dry air moving on in, those winds will be increasing, and Tuesday and Wednesday looking likely that we're going to see the coldest of those temperatures that we've seen in quite a long time there. So looking at those bridges and overpasses, of course, we're seeing very hazardous bridges and overpasses across our northern and western areas, and that is because most roads lose heat evenly, but unlike normal roads, you have those bridges and overpasses that usually has that cold air below it, and that cold air can definitely cause colder conditions in the elevated surfaces, and that's why we're seeing some freezing in some locations, especially north and west of town. Looking at that future track, we are expecting that freeze line to still remain just offshore, with those temps dropping into the teens for the early morning hours. We are really not expected to get above freezing at least until early Wednesday afternoon. So temperatures Tuesday, by Tuesday night, still remaining in the mid-20s, and then eventually dropping into the upper teens heading into early Wednesday morning. And that is a good 24 hours of below freezing temperatures here across our area. So winds are going to be gusting up to about 20 to 25 miles an hour. So if you thought the wind chill was cold now, it's going to be colder heading into tomorrow, as winds are expected to exceed gusting up to 25 and 30 miles an hour in some locations, especially for early Tuesday morning, as this next surge of cold air will be moving across southeast Texas. So that wind chill threat is something not to really be underestimating, because you could get some frostbite in some of your outer limbs if you are exposed to those elements with these extremely high wind gusts that we're expecting to see within the next 5 to 12 hours here across the Houston area. And that's when we're expecting to see those winds gusting rather in the single digits in terms of the wind chill. The good news is that Wednesday we will see winds die down, gusting up to maybe 5-6 miles an hour. So it's going to feel warmer on Wednesday, even though those temperatures really not warming up all that much. That's when we're expecting those temps to eventually rise above at least 40-45 degrees. So as we look at those future feels like temps, it's going to feel as cold as 7 degrees at Bush Airport, 4 degrees out in Columbus, Pearland feeling as cold as 9 degrees. Much colder for areas off to the northwest. So definitely very cold conditions, stuff that we're really not used to here across the Houston area. We haven't had a freeze in over a year since definitely expecting those conditions. So as your 7-day forecast, we are expecting those temps to remain very cold at least until Wednesday afternoon, with those hard freeze warnings in effect. And then going into Thursday and Friday, could see another system move through on Thursday and Friday, but this cold front not as strong as what we're dealing with now. But unfortunately, the warm temps just really not returning until we get to Thursday, as those temps are going to be remaining back into the mid-40s for Friday, Saturday, and into Sunday. So I'm going to go ahead, and if you're just now joining us, I'm going to go ahead and start over and show you what we're looking at in terms of the winter weather situation here across the Houston area. So just keep in mind that if you are making your way across those roadways, if you see any wet spots, you want to treat them as ice, as the temperatures has not risen above freezing, at least for the past at least 12 hours. Freezing rain and sleet will be ending by midnight. We're going to have a surge of dry air moving into southeast Texas. That's going to increase the winds gusting up to 25-30 miles an hour. We are expecting overnight lows to be in the teens and 20s. Feels like temps and wind chills are going to be in the single digits here across Houston. So 28 degrees right now, very cold conditions, feeling like 16 when you factor in those north winds at 16 to 20 miles an hour. Right now, that precipitation is sticking mainly along our coastal areas. It has now ended for Houston and areas north and west, but we're still seeing some very dangerous conditions on those frozen bridges and overpasses west and north of downtown Houston. So you are going to have to be advised it's really not safe to be traveling along those roadways, at least for the next few hours, if not tonight and into tomorrow morning, as those temps are expected to remain in the 20s. So looking at that radar loop, that precipitation already making its way across our extreme southeast portions of Texas. We are expecting that precipitation to end at least by midnight. So that's the good news. But like I said, winds are going to pick up significantly, and we've seen freezing rain here across the Houston area, which ultimately causes those ice accumulations, and that's why we're dealing with a very hazardous environment in terms of those roadways, bridges, and overpasses. So temps right now in the upper 20s. We're not expecting to warm up into above freezing, at least until Wednesday afternoon. Winds right now gusting between 14 and 15 miles an hour. Ultimately, those wind speeds that you see are what's causing those feels like temps in the teens here across the area. So you're able to see it feeling like 16 right now at Bush Airport, 16 out at Sugar Land, even 13 in Brenham. Winter weather advisory now includes all of southeast Texas. That's because we are definitely seeing that light freezing rain and drizzle and those ice accumulations up to 1/10 of an inch. So be extremely careful if you are driving out and about. But now, as we head into Monday night into early Tuesday, that's when we are expecting that wind chill threat. Wind chill advisory feeling like as cold as 5 to 10 degrees, as those winds are going to be stronger in the overnight to early morning hours of Tuesday. Hard freeze warning in effect until 9 a.m. Wednesday, as we are expecting several hours of below freezing temps here across the area. So definitely expecting those temperatures to really not rise above 32 degrees, remaining at least below 24 for 2 or more hours. And that could cause some heavy freeze damage to plants, as temperatures really has not warming up all that much. Going into the rest of our evening, we are expecting the precipitation to end at least by 9 o'clock. We could still see some isolated areas of that freezing precip from Galveston to League City along the I-45 corridor, but definitely saw some heavier precipitation, some heavier frozen precipitation west and north of Houston that we've seen so far. So expecting those conditions to remain extremely cold here across southeast Texas. The precipitation chance ending by midnight. But as we head into Tuesday morning, that wind chill is going to be a very dangerous factor if you are exposed to those elements out and about, as we are going to see those feels like temps in the single digits. So be extremely careful and be warm out there. Stay home. Don't drive on those roadways, as well as bring those pets indoors. And always, you can find the latest weather updates and the latest information about this Arctic blast impacting southeast Texas and the Houston area on KHOU.com.